When there's a famine in the house of bread, it seems to indicate some type of a worst-case scenario that drives the people away from the place where normally they are fed. That makes sense to anybody? I'm going real slow. This is a short sermon. I'm just going to go slow so it soaks in. The famine in the house of bread drove Elimelech, Naomi, Mahlon, and Chilion away from their normal place where they were fed. This is a sermon on why people don't go to church anymore. And you say, well, then why are you preaching it to me? I'm in here. Do you know anybody? Can I ask you a question? Do you know anybody who used to go to church but doesn't go to church anymore? If you know somebody like that, you understand why I'm preaching this sermon. It's because they weren't getting fed anymore. And maybe they were. Maybe they just said, you know what? I'm full of bread. Marie Antoinette. Does anybody know what happened to Marie Antoinette? Well, yeah. They came in. It's French Revolution. They came in and tell Marie Antoinette, the people are starving. They have no bread. She's sitting on her couch eating grapes. That's the way I picture it. She says, let them have cake. True story. Think she was a little out of touch. Oh, if they don't have bread, let them eat cake. They said, when they finally got in there to her, they chopped her head off. They said, you will eat no more cake or bread or grapes. I don't know if she was eating grapes. I made that up because I like the story. See, we act like there's plenty of food. We act like there's no problem getting a hold of food. We're talking about Haiti and the famine. There's a famine in Haiti. Physical, spiritual, every other way. I would suggest to you this morning, there's a famine in the United States. A spiritual famine of a lack of bread in the churches of the United States of America. And I'm telling you, the doors are open, the lights are on, the buildings are up, the signs are out there, but nothing's happening inside the church. And we need to change that. We need to be baking fresh bread. I'm not going to pinpoint John and Sherry. I'm just going to point out that last week, 2 weeks ago now, I wasn't here last week. 2 weeks ago, my good friend Bob Otis was here, related to these guys. Church was over. Down he comes. We didn't get together like we normally do because we were pressed for time. But he came and stood right here. He said, oh, Pastor, I love when I come home. I love to come out here and go to church because I sense God in here. Have a slice of bread. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. If you're not feeling like you're getting fresh bread when you come here, then please don't take this. I'm saying you ought to be looking at somewhere where they make fresh bread. But I'm going to tell you, I believe with everything in me, we do our best to bake fresh bread, to sense the presence of God, to pray on these altars, not vain, empty words, not just some sort of ritual. If you notice, we don't say, turn to page 71 in your prayer books and follow along. We don't. I'm not knocking people that do, except that I'm telling you, it's not just a ritual, same old thing. We pour our hearts out to God, and God moves in the lives of people. Things happen, not because of us, but because we let God come. There's a famine. There's a famine in the house of bread today. And the house of bread is the church in America. And we're going to go down the same road the European countries have if we don't wake up to the fact that there is a famine and we need to get serious with God. We need to get serious with God. Point number 2. I told you it's a short sermon. Short sermon. Bless the preacher today for preaching a short sermon. Of course, that closing could get long, but nope. Point number 2, verse 6, we need a visitation. Now, this is crazy. This is crazy. I don't know. I'm trying to think of how far. I don't know why. I don't mean to be pointing people out, but Jerry Gilbert, I just noticed he's back there. You told me one time that you were over on the western side of the state. You remember that? You were at some kind of show for school. You remember that? And you told somebody, you were from Ottumwa, but you told them you went to Moravia, Iowa to go to church. You remember telling me that story? Do you know what town you were in? Was that Council Bluffs or western side of the state? West of Council Bluffs, that would be Nebraska. Okay, pretty far west. I'm not close enough. I'm trying to read his lips. The person said he's over on the western side of the state, told somebody he goes to church in Moravia, Iowa. He's from Ottumwa but drives to Moravia, Iowa to go to church. They said, oh, you must go to the Nazarene church. Did that happen? See, now if he wasn't in here and I told that story, he'd say, sure, he ain't here. You did made that up. There he sits. Has anybody else ever had anything like that happen to you? Have anybody away from this place told you they've heard of this church? Anybody, raise your hand if you have had that happen. Quite a few. Now you say, why are you saying that? You want to be famous, preacher? No, I don't want to be famous. I'm trying to point out to you that people hear when bread is available. That's what I'm trying to say to you. Why in the world does a church exist except to feed the people the Word of God? So there's lots of things we can do. That's the problem. I believe that. Fellowship, activities, programs, all that's good. But we exist to feed on the Word of God. If you do the other and don't do that, you're sitting in a starving place, and it will drive people away. You can do all the other and have the Word of God, and it's good. Now, Ruth was an unbeliever. Actually, Orpah was still there too. Naomi said, down in Moab, I'm going home. She wanted to go back to church, all right, just for my illustration. She wanted to go back to church because she knew when she left that something was wrong, but now she's heard God has visited and there's bread again. Can I tell you something? Unbelievers, if you're full, and if you're talking about, and if you're spreading the word about the fresh bread, unbelievers will say, I'm going to go with you. I want to go get some of that. Oh, I'm sorry. Larry, I think my battery went dead. No, it seems to be working. Okay, I'll try it again. If you are leaving here talking about living out, demonstrating fresh bread, unbelievers are going to see you and say, I'm going to go too. See, y'all see how this works? Now we get to move on. That's so good. Verse 6. Then she rose with her daughters that she might return from the country of Moab, for she heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. Who told Naomi? Who told you? How did you hear? See, I'm telling you, you know what's killing us? Where's Mike Bruxford? There he is. I just saw you right when I said it. Do you believe we're suffering for a need for evangelism in the church? I knew who to ask that question. You know what he does here? I mean, besides take up your money, that's really an unimportant thing, sort of. It's sort of important, but Mike Bruxford teaches a class on personal evangelism. Teaches a class on personal evangelism. Right now he's doing it on Wednesday nights for men. He's doing it right now on Wednesday nights for men because men need to learn how to share their faith. Fine to talk about the weather. Fine to talk about farming. Fine to talk about football or baseball. Fine. But are you telling anybody about fresh bread? That's the question. We need a visitation. We need a visitation. This is so easy. 2 weeks ago, I've mentioned it several times.